To be joined in terms of our panellists, and you can see, and I'm sure you recognise our panel members who have joined us. So we have Patrick Casement joining us from Environment Link. You're very welcome, Patrick. We have Wilbert Main joining us from representing UFU, and we've also got John McElroy from AFBI, who's an ammonia specialist. So thank you very much as well. So from our point of view now, we're going to move on and start taking some questions coming through again from Slido. So if any of you have not put your questions forward, if you would like to do that and get us started, so please go ahead and add some more questions as and when. So I think before we start, I'm just going to ask for our new panellists to maybe give us a little bit of their reflections on those two presentations, and bearing in mind there are 3 of you joined us, so if I ask you maybe to keep it down to 1 or 2 minutes, maybe to start with John.
Okay, yeah. Thanks very much, Ursula. Just to thank our speakers really for a very detailed insight into the agri-environmental issues that are facing Northern Ireland, or the agri-food sector in Northern Ireland. It's clear that there are many challenges facing the sector, and I think really scientific research will hopefully address many of these issues. With regards to the ammonia issue, I think that really we need specific Northern Ireland research into this area in order to refine our calculations of the national ammonia inventory, in particular with regards to the Northern Ireland, the involved administration end, and that will allow us to create an accurate baseline from which we can then measure progress in ammonia mitigation. So I think that's probably one of the key areas with regards to the ammonia debate, where we need to focus our attention really.
Okay, thank you, John. Over to Patrick.
I'd just like to say I'm delighted to be here today. There would have been a time not very long ago when someone from the environmental organisations would not have appeared probably or been invited to appear here. There has been a huge sea change in the way we look at in Northern Ireland. We're looking at the environment and including it in discussions about the future of agriculture and about the way we look at agriculture. It's partly, I think, because of the departmental reorganisation, but I think it's also a realisation more widely that we cannot go on the way we have, and this is reflected in the work of the Sustainable Land Management Group. And so I'm delighted to be here. I'm not sure how much I'm going to be able to contribute to this discussion.
No, thank you. Wilbert.
Thank you, Chair. Representing the farming sector, I think that we started off with a nitrates issue. It has now moved on. Basically, we had a phosphate problem rather than nitrates. We've now moved on to an ammonia issue, and I hope we don't have to go down the same route as the nitrate regulations, because if we have to go that particular route, I think we're heading in a dangerous direction. I think, in a sense, it's disappointing in the sense at the present time that the ammonia issue is there. We have a number of farmers applied for Farm Business Improvement Scheme on the Tier 2 and a year ago, and we're still waiting for some of those applications to still be processed. It's very soul destroying for a young lad or a girl if they go to an agricultural college and they come home and they want to increase the size of the business, that have applied for a grant scheme and basically they're restricted in what they can do. Basically they can do nothing, and they want to grow their business, and there's the drive there and the incentive, and yet they're being tied at the present time. So leave it at that.
Okay. Wilbur, thank you very much. And you're making very valid points, because what we want to be doing as Northern Ireland is we want to be encouraging all of our young people to be joining farming. So what we want to ensure is that we're not putting restrictions there, and we're educating them and we're encouraging them into farming. So I think from a regulation point of view, it's very, very important that we're not putting blockages in the way there. So we're now going to move on to questions, and there's quite a few questions coming up here. So we'll start off with number 1, which is: Northern Ireland farmers invest 1/3 as much as GB farmers in research and development. Is this sustainable going forward? So I think I'm going to ask maybe John to start us off with that one.
I've spent my life in using the product of R&D, and for me, I actually believe as an industry we don't actually invest enough in R&D. The issue is, what R&D are we going to invest in? I think there are 2 or 3 key drivers. One is about the quality and safety of the product we produce. One is about the quality of the process we have in. And certainly from the land management strategy, we did not have that science to go back in. Land management strategy actually was a pleasure to do, because there is a lot of science already out there, and we were able to go and look at it and actually say, actually our problem now is how we implement it rather than create new, although there is more we need. In the case of ammonia, we will not get out of the ammonia hole until we have the answers of R&D. And so investment in that is absolutely critical to get us out of the hole. And the other part of that is making sure that when we get sound science, is then it's recognized by policymakers and regulators, and it is embraced immediately. Because when the biggest issue for us then is when the new sound knowledge comes and people take it up, is actually both the marketplace and regulators and policymakers recognize farmers for positive behavior. And that is not always the case at the moment.
Okay, thank you for that. Moving on to the second question then. Farming near a priority habitat. Why are legislators refusing to accept scientific evidence in ammonia modelling which is showing an environmental betterment? Patrick, give us your view on that one.
I'm not sure I can answer the question directly.
No,
in that, I think they are. I mean, in many ways, the problem is that they feel that they are constrained by a legal framework of some sort, and there is no flexibility within that, and there is no recognition, as John has pointed out, of some of the recent advances in science and in mitigation measures. They are also, at times, there is also an issue that it's not the actual applicant that is the problem here, it is their neighbours who are producing large amounts of nitrogen or ammonia very often as well. So this is a very complicated situation. I think there needs to be a greater flexibility, there needs to be better recognition of science and measurement and of mitigation measures. We need to rethink the model. The problem in some ways is that we have actually not just one model here, we have a series of different models, all of which are based on an initial model, and then you feed data from that into a subsequent model. And if you get the data wrong or you get the interpretation wrong at the beginning, you could be magnifying the error as you go on. And I think we do need to be absolutely clear that the inputs into the model are accurate and up to date. And I think that's one of the problems. And then we have to persuade the policymakers that they need to move the policy, the regulation, in line with the findings that come forward.
I suppose my build on that question would be as well, what more can we do to persuade the policymakers? And John, I know you're looking to step in there.
Well, ammonia has been a particularly difficult issue, okay? And we tried to get to the root of actually what got us into the mess that we're in. Because in fairness, in nitrates, in water quality, in phosphates, there has been actually a very open dialogue between the department, the regulator, the industry. In the last 10 years, on 3 different occasions, the screening criteria for planning on agricultural developments changed with no consultation with the industry. So when the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Environment merged together, it would be fair to say probably 80% of the new department had never heard of the ammonia issue. And so if that consultation had taken place, the signals would have been there earlier for us to invest in the knowledge, which now are not there. And now we're playing backup. Now, in fairness to the new collective department, as we worked through this process last year, they recognized what we were throwing up. And in fairness to the Chief Science Advisor, he put a team together instructed by the Permanent Secretary to actually rush through procurement to actually get science procured and actually start answering some of those questions. And I give credit to the department that they at least recognized it. The sadness for me is we were allowed to fall into this hole in the first place. We didn't have to go where we now are. If it had been flagged up early through proper ways where regulators and policymakers consult with the industry, then we can see, the problem before it hits us, and we can do something about it. In the case of ammonia, we fell into the trap before we were able to do anything about it. And that has left us in the mess. Now we're backfilling to try and get the research and also bringing transparency to the regulatory process. And now the regulators also now have to embrace this process. and we expect a response from the department sooner rather than later on the ammonia annex, answering some of the questions that were raised in that report, specifically tackling these issues.
Great, thank you. So,
Sorry, Chair.
sorry.
Just a comment, and Patrick mentioned here about different sectors. I think we need to be very careful. The livestock sector seems to be taking the brunt of all the issues at the present time, and we don't want to put one sector against the other. Well, the intensive sector and all the rest of it, and if you're living in that particular area in Parma and you want to grow your business there, unfortunately your neighbours have a big impact on where you can go with your production and increase your production as well. So, and we don't want to get one sector against the other. That's the last thing we want to happen.
And I think that's incumbent upon us, and particularly the people in this room, to be very aware of that as well, is that we're not here to be pitting one sector against the other. This is about Northern Ireland and working together. Okay, moving on to the next question. Is a ban on splash plates economically realistic for the beef sector in Northern Ireland when the average cow herd is 18? Wilbert.
I would probably be at variance for John on this one. It's okay if you can apply for a grant, spend 20, 25, 30,000 and get 40% back. But if you're a small farmer, 18, 20, 50 cows, there's no way you could afford that sort of equipment. And in my neck of the woods, contractors are very in short supply, and everybody wants them. If it's a good dry day, everybody wants them all in one day. So unfortunately, they only can work 24 hours a day. That's all the hours they're in the day, and it's very difficult. So I think the 2025 deadline is maybe not realistic, but it's not a bad thing to aim for. But I think in the round, I think I'm going to be at variance with John on that one.
I'm going to ask John McElroy to maybe comment on that one as well as our specialist.
Well, maybe I would just add to that I suppose this is really where we can get involved with industry a lot and work with. We have been approached by companies that market and sell different types of land spreading, slurry spreading techniques. So I suppose this is where, by working with them, we can possibly find ways to find low trajectory spreading techniques which are cost effective for these small scale farms, for the smaller scale farms. So that's probably just what I would add.
John,
Can I say the one thing that when we talk about splash plates, there are two or three comments to make. First of all, if you look at the totality of the ammonia and the restrictions that are coming on planning, we felt it was better that we collectively took action, because it's very unfair for a farmer by default living near priority habitat for all the pain to be put on them. Is that there was a role for us collectively. If you can get the total emissions down, you have more wriggle room for everybody else. So strategically, we felt it was better to do that. Second of all, the science is very sound on the improvement of utilization of nutrient if you put it through trailing shoe or whatever than splash plates. So if you look at nutrient efficiency, the cost of that comes a long way to sort out the splash plate. The one thing is very clear, the last 6 months has been hell for livestock farmers. And the massive move in the last 6 months to umbilical systems with trailing shoes and whatever is huge. And we think the industry are going here by default because these extreme weather events we're having now is people are having to modify their system as such. And the key thing we did is at the end of the day, we accept there will be a degree of pain for certain people. That's why we're tapering it. That's why it's coming. You know, we're saying, you know, ban from sale of it in 2020, ban of use in 2025. That's 7 years away. If we can't, as an industry, come up with smarter solutions that are more cost effective, then we've failed. And I'm absolutely delighted John beside me here is flagging up AFBI's desire to get involved and roll their sleeves up and try and find lower cost ways.
Could I just add something there? And just to pick up on what John has said, that the danger here is that we're going to start treating ammonia as if it's some sort of toxic substance, that it's a real problem and an issue. It's not the case. This is just a form of nitrogen. Nitrogen is one of the most important nutrients that farmers want on their land. And anything that we can do that means that instead of going into the atmosphere, it gets onto the land and is helped to grow grass or the crops that are needed must be a plus. So I think we need to think a little bit differently about it. Instead of thinking about it as a problem, think about it as part of your, as a resource, as part of your solution to better farming, where you don't have to buy nitrogen in a bag at whatever it is, 300 and something pounds a tonne, eye-watering cost. It's there in your slurry, in your manure. And if you spread it in the wrong way, you would just lose it. It would just go straight into the atmosphere. And I think we need to get that message across very
So
strongly.
it's different
Yeah.
mindset, different
Yeah.
way of thinking. Okay, thank you. Next question then. So when are the policymakers and regulators within DAERA going to catch up with the scientists and allow sustainable growth in the Northern Ireland agricultural sector? Donagh, you're dying to get in for that one.
That's an interesting question. That's a very interesting question, Nat. I was reading it and wondering how to reply, but I think as scientists, more than anything, we see the challenges that there are there in terms of sustainable growth for the industry, and there's significant uncertainties over that. One of the points I'd make is, it really does depend on what we define as sustainable, and how we define sustainable growth. That's going to be a lot easier to achieve in a catchment or an area where you have very, very good water quality, rather than an area where you have poor water quality. How do you achieve sustainable growth in an area that you have poor water quality already? So I do think the scientists, I think we have an understanding that sustainable growth is possible, but I think we would argue that there needs to be tailor-made solutions to problems in particular areas if that's going to be achieved. And there probably hasn't been enough investment in looking at how we can tailor the issues, the mitigation measures that we're targeting. How can we get that right down to a farm-specific basis so that we can achieve sustainable growth? And it's a big, big issue, and it really does come down to what we define as sustainable.
Great. John, you want to just give me 1 minute?
As there is no one from DAERA on the panel, and God forbid that I'm seen to represent DAERA, which I'm not, but I want to make a couple of observations. I wish DAERA had engaged as quickly on the land management strategy as they have on the ammonia. The ammonia board that's been set up is cross-disciplined within DAERA. They have now engaged in science, they've now procured science, and they had that procured even before our report was out there. I think there is an absolute realism in DAERA that actually to crack this, you need to bring everyone together, regulators, scientists, policymakers, and get them all into the one room. Yes, I'm still, as chairman of the expert working group, waiting for a response from DAERA on our ammonia report. But in fairness, I have never seen in any other issue but ammonia to actually seeing a government department move as quick to actually try and get themselves out. We are on a bind here, and we need to be very careful. The big issue for me is slightly different, and that is the interpretation. What is it we want to achieve? Is it that we want to reduce ammonia and drive positive behavioural change, or is it that we just want to be legally compliant? And those two things are not necessarily the same thing. Now, I, as a passionate farmer and a passionate environmentalist, believe what is right is delivering positive behavioural change and reducing the impact and delivering economic benefit. And so there's a very big decision to be made in Northern Ireland. What is it that we're going to be forced down the route? And I only plea for the regulators and policymakers in this room is take this opportunity now, take a pause when you make the next couple of decisions over the next couple of weeks. It is about driving positive behavioural change, and where farmers, for no fault of their own, are now in the wrong place, is they are allowed to put their house in order and are helped to do that, and they become like beacon farmers or focus farmers of best practice to help other people in the community. And we drive behavioural change and not put them out of business.
Okay, thank you. Okay, what practical solutions are open to farmers to manage phosphorus in slurry on farms with high P indices? I think John McElroy.
Phosphorus wouldn't exactly be my area, but I know that we are carrying out. Donagh, if you want to jump in first, Donagh.
Yeah, I think ammonia is a really big issue, but I think this is a big issue that's going to come down the line very, very quickly to the Northern Irish industry, and how we manage those high P soils. I think we touched on a couple of issues there and how they need to be managed. One is the processing of manure and exporting it off farms where necessary, and exporting it to areas or to industries, other areas that need that phosphorus. I think I also touched on the issue about identifying those high-risk areas, high-risk runoff areas within farms, and banning slurry spreading in certain fields at certain times of the year if they're high risk for runoff, and that farmers have to spread them in other areas. I also think that we need to mine, in certain soils, we need to mine down the soil P. We need to be encouraging farmers to cut silage, very, very, instead of grazing them, that they cut silage and they mine the phosphorus out out of the soil. There would be the three of the issues that we definitely need to deal with. But it's very complex. There's a toolbox of issues that need to be put together to deal with, to provide farmers with a range of issues that they can choose from for their particular farm.
Okay, thank you. Wilbur?
Chair, I think one of the key elements is education. Donald talked earlier on about only 2%, or maybe John, only 2% of the fields in Northern Ireland are soil sampled. Certainly the pilot programme that was conducted over the winter time was very useful. It brought in another 20-odd thousand fields. And out of that then was the follow-up workshops that were conducted for those that were involved in that, and educate them how to read the soil analysis and how to get the best out of what was on your land and how to put on slurry and lime and all the rest of it. So key would be education, because an awful lot of farmers out there haven't a clue. And like I looked around in one of the workshops I attended, and a lot of them were farmers that don't belong to a discussion group, don't belong to a business development group, and all that type of stuff. So they're basically farming on their own, maybe small farmers, large farmers, but education's key.
Okay.
Can I just say about phosphate? One of the key things we actually, and it also is with regulators and policymakers and scientists too, if you have a field that typically allows a lot of runoff, it doesn't matter whether your P indice is high or low. If it's a field that has a lot of overland flow on it, it will be an issue. Likewise, if you've got fields that don't have runoff or high P, it's not the same issue. So the work that that Donata's team is doing around this whole issue, where are the critical source areas, what's the routes of overland flow, is really vital. And this is new science. This last 5 years, the work that these guys are doing and using LiDAR and using nutrient maps actually goes to the heart of it. Because our old-fashioned way saying, if you're over a phosphate indice of 2.5, you back off, if you blow, that is now not totally correct if you're in areas of high overland flow or low overland flow. And this whole topography and hydrology issue now becomes a really big issue. And at least now we're getting to the bottom of it.
Okay, thank you.
Could I just say something about phosphorus legacy as well? And I'm going to borrow a story from John in a way. You may cast your mind back to one of John's slides which showed a soil analysis map of land that John is managing at Douth. And on it there were 4 dark red splodges that stood out for me anyway. And John couldn't understand why they had such high phosphorus index. It was way up, 4 or 5. Until an archaeologist came in and said, why, have you got an archaeological map on your wall? And John said, no, it's a soil analysis map. And the archaeologist said, no, that shows where the medieval settlements were 1,000 years ago. It's a sobering thought that P can continue at that level in the soil for 1,000 years. So I think we do need to think very long and hard about the P legacy.
And just to finalise the discussion on the P legacy, P in soil is the only issue. There's P in lakes, there's P in rivers that will be there for an extended period of time, and that will affect our ability to achieve the targets of the Water Framework Directive. So it's not just an agricultural issue, it's also a water quality issue.
And extreme weather events can release that by floodwater rushing into a lake or through a river, can cause massive release of some of that P as well. So it becomes active again rather than being inactive.
Okay, so we're probably coming down to the last 2 or 3 questions. I'm being told, no, definitely not the last 2 or 3 questions. Keep them on the screen for me. Okay, so what has to change in the management of livestock manure to reduce the ammonia emissions in farms? I'm going to ask Donagh. Oh my goodness, we're going to get hands up everywhere here.
Yeah, I think
we'll
this
start
is...
with John.
Thanks, Ursula. I think this is one of the big problems with the ammonia situation, is that really in order to tackle this problem fully, we need to adopt a holistic approach. So the problem is that you can lose ammonia at every stage throughout if we're talking about the manure management chain, you can lose ammonia at every stage. So if we adopt measures, say at the first stage, say if we forget about grazing emissions because we can't do really much about them, but at the livestock housing stage, if we try to adopt measures to reduce our emissions there, we maintain more ammonic and nitrogen in the slurry. But if we don't then adopt measures later down the manure management chain, that saved ammonic and nitrogen at that stage has the potential to volatilise and be lost. At the same time, if we adopt, say, land spreading techniques, these low trajectory emission spreading techniques, at the land spreading stage, but we haven't adopted ammonia abatement mitigation techniques throughout the livestock, housing and the storage stages, we've already lost a lot of our ammoniacal nitrogen at those stages. So I think this, we really do need to adopt a holistic approach by which we can mitigate ammonia at each stage throughout the manure management chain, and that's going to be the best way really to tackle this issue.
Okay. Don, have you anything to add to that?
No, I think John has summed it up there as well.
John?
The other tip is keeping a tidy yard. I mean, Chair, your own sector, one of the privileges of going around your sector is how tidy the yards are. A clean yard can reduce ammonia emissions by 30%. You know, I just think it's incumbent, and I know I've had conversations with the Ulster Farmers Union, and I used to be involved in cereal competitions and whatever else. I actually would love a tidy farmyard competition. Just to get that culture shifted, is a clean yard is really good for ammonia emissions. And it's good for everything else. Good for our persona when we bring purchaser or product round. It just gives such a good image. And in the case of ammonia, remember in ammonia, if you can keep the feces and urine separate, you have far less problems. In a concrete yard, the sooner you get that cleared and keep that clean, you can greatly reduce ammonia emissions. You know, it's a simple thing to do.
Okay. Wilbert, any comments on that?
No,
You okay? Okay, I'm allowed to take one more. I'm going to take a really quick one at the bottom, saying, how often should soil analysis be conducted?
4 to 5 years.
Every
4 to 5 years.
Every 4 to 5 years. Okay, so we're not talking terribly regularly, but every 4 to 5 years would really give us lots of data around farms. Okay, am I allowed to take another one now? So, given the challenges of grazing in certain areas, fully housed systems have become more common. Is there potential this system will be challenged by policy? And again, if I could just ask for views, so Wilbert, any views on that one?
I think that's going to be a difficult one because you have the grass man, and then you have the other man that's selling for 10, 11,000 litres per cow. And I've sat on many a debate, and the grass man is sitting at 5,000, 6,000 litres compared with the other one, Aileen laughing down here, because she's been in on it as well. Certainly it's a very difficult question to do it. Every system's own, and public grass is the cheapest feed you can get. That's how you utilise it and get it into the animal without adding too much expense. I know the intensive folk are, with the cows and all around, are now looking at throwing the grass in, cutting it and bringing it into them. It's another expense, but if you can get them outside to the grass, there's no better way to eat it. But Northern Ireland doesn't allow that. We've seen from August till currently 7, 8 months of wet weather where you can't do it. So every system for their own.
Okay, Donna.
I would just, I suppose, fully housed systems create a problem in their own right, in that there's a huge volume of slurry that has to be managed. And in the conditions that we have in Northern Ireland, where there's high risk of runoff in many of our soils, getting time to spread that slurry is going to be a challenge. So policymakers may challenge it based on that basis.
At the end of the day, there is no silver bullet of a system. There are many people whose grazing platform is not convenient enough that they have no other choice but to go and look at a housing alternative because their grazing platform can't be structured. But it is very clear in the case of ammonia emissions, the easiest way to reduce ammonia emissions is to extend that grazing season. I think the challenge for us as a sector, most of the economy is based on grass-based agriculture, is how do we make that grazing platform more resilient? It just doesn't win for ammonia, it wins for water quality, it wins for trafficability. Like Jim McAdams' work in Loch Goal showing an increase in trafficability on grassland by 17 weeks a year is outstanding. And certainly if a lot of farmers had that going through September, October, November last year, they would have been really happy. So I think it challenges our culture and how we currently practice our farming. And I think there are new systems out there that I think we should look at. And I'm delighted to hear that under the Rural Development Programme, the agri-forestry side has been well taken up, and that we're going to see that now coming in. I think there are 30 farmers, Jim, that are in the new scheme, which I'm absolutely delighted to see. And this week, the Dublin government has announced exactly the same. They're launching a new scheme for farmers to try and tackle this.
Thank you. I'm going to need to close now because we are...
Can I just clarify one thing I said there? Because the question on the soil sampling, I answered that question based on phosphorus, 4 to 5 years fine. But if you're talking something like potassium or something that would go much quicker in the soil, you may have to sample more regularly. Just to clarify that point, so it's no confusion.
Okay, everyone, let's thank the panellists. Thank you very much.